Hey everyone, Tactics here with a brand new background too, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Today we're talking about a highly requested topic, the bolstering affix. With the first week of bolstering in season 3 underway, currently I've heard a lot of people kind of struggling with roots and mobs that they weren't previously having issues with, so we're going to cover how to adjust your roots for the bolstering affix to kind of make them less dangerous, and we're also going to talk about potential pain points in every single dungeon and how you can potentially alleviate them. To get started, as you can see on screen here, we've got a dungeon that a lot of people have been struggling with, and that is the Everbloom. Because there are so many differences between like a standard pug Everbloom route and what I would recommend you using in a bolstering week, I am going to leave an MDT string for this dungeon specifically down in the description below, because basically we're going to be skipping a lot of A-bombs here. It's kind of a modification of one of the higher key routes because you can't really play A-bombs on higher key levels. And so the reason bolstering week is so tough in Everbloom is because of these dread petals. They bolster, they do on death affixes, and so having these bolster up any of the mobs. The three main ones are the naturalists, they have significantly more health. The berserkers also have significantly more health, and of course what I mentioned, those A-bombs are exceptionally deadly if you bolster them up with like a 5-pack of petals, for example. And so instead of trying to play around that, because their health pool is so massively bigger, we're instead just going to not pull them. Now there is going to be those naturalists, those berserkers in some of these pulls with the flowers. Maybe this first pull off the top again with all CDs with lust, you should be okay. What you want to be aware of is potentially this berserker jumping out to a range and then AFKing out there for a bit and not getting cleaved down with the rest of the pack. So that's the one thing you want to watch out for in the berserker pools, which is only a couple of them. There's not too many. We skip a lot of berserkers as well, but just something to keep in mind. And similarly, the naturalist, making sure that you maintain kicks on them once they're giga bolstered, so your tanks don't just get immediately one-shot by them. But again, with this first pull, this is like the scarier pull here, because there's going to be 6 petals to bolster everything up real quick. Stingers should get cleaved down relatively quickly with the dread petals, so it's not too big a deal. Cultivators don't do anything, but it's really these naturalists and the one berserker, so that's what you want to be aware of. And the rest of this is basically you're pulling a ton of stuff in this area, but it's much less scarier, right? It's like 5 petals with a couple stingers and a naturalist, so you just make sure you cleave these stingers down with the petals so they don't get bolstered up. Similarly here, we've got a couple petals with a stinger, and you've got gnarl root notably with the dread petal, and that's to make up for count. So what I would just caution, do not pull these dread petals in until gnarl root is around their HP. Just make sure they are relatively low, then pull them in. And to deal with gnarl root, just make sure your group is stacked up so you can have all those roots kind of come out on you as a group. You AoE them down relatively quickly, and then you can move out of the tornadoes as a group. Just stay together basically when you're fighting this mob. And then you actually go into the cubby here to get some more count, because again, we're skipping a lot of count in the middle of the dungeon, but this is significantly less dangerous, right? Yes, you're going to get some bolsters up here from the dread petals, but it's into a cultivator who's not really dangerous and a mender who's not really dangerous. Similarly out here, make sure to cleave this stinger even, and then you've just got an extra naturalist you need to worry about getting kicks on. Watch these guys, they patrol relatively slowly back and forth here, but it's not too big a deal. And then you're just doing kind of standard stuff over here by Witherbark. You can pull these into Witherbark or do them after alone, either works. Just cleave them even. And then you're going to come down here, just watch this patrol. You're going to grab these guys here, pull them away from the patrol, and then you can actually invis all the way up to this boss. There's like a spot like right here, I believe, on this corner, or you can do it over here as well, depending on where this patrol is at. And you should be able to invis all the way up with an invis pot to this pack 14 up here. And then you're skipping what, 1, 2, 3, 4 A-bombs here. Very, very value skip. Obviously, yes, it involves a skip, but that is the #1 way to get around this dungeon feeling absolutely terrible to play, because the real issue again is these dread petals combined with any A-bomb whatsoever. So I recommend doing this. The rest of the dungeon is as normal, and this really, really does kind of help you out with preventing bolstering from feeling terrible in this dungeon. Otherwise, let's kind of go through some of the other dungeons real quick. I think Waycrest Manor is another kind of tough one here. Oh, what's going on there? Don't know. Anyways, the issues with Waycrest Manor here are going to be the random spawns of witches here, right? So you've got the rune weavers. These are the guys with etch. Whenever one of these spawns, you're kind of worried. So watch where these guys are spawning and try and hard focus them. Usually they're not too big pulls, right? It's like a 3-pack here. It's like a pull of non-bolstering mobs over here, that kind of thing. So it's not too scary for the most part. But just be aware, whenever you get a rune weaver, a bolstered etch is just death on a fortified week, right? So be aware of that. The other thing are these dogs, the jagged hounds, mostly in the courtyard, but also in the basement. Try and pull through this bottom door here initially and grab this on its own. Kill them all because they do on death affixes. Nothing will get giga bolstered. Then come in and do this pack. You only have one singular caster that gets the 4 bolstering, and then you can chain into this pack and just make sure you get all the kicks on the bolstered mob, and you should be good. Similarly, in the basement here, there are some more jagged hounds. So if you're pulling stuff in the basement, not all roots do, but if you are, make sure you kill these 4 dogs, bolster this thorn shaper on its own, whatever, and then add the mini boss. If you're doing the mini boss, it would be real bad to pull this stuff together and instantly 4 bolster stack the mini boss, right? So just make sure you are being aware of the jagged hounds, and they're really the most scary part in this dungeon in particular. I think Throne of the Tides is another one which has a couple problem points. For the most part, this intro area is very similar. It's not too different. It's really once you start getting into the hallway towards the third boss, where you have these squid guys, and they do bolster. Again, they're much lower health compared to any of the other mobs here, right? These guys like triple their HP, and so you just need to be careful. Pull this area slower. This is kind of like a good recommendation here. Just maybe cut this part out and do these guys all on their own kind of deal on this kind of week, and that's probably ideal. And just make sure when these bolsters do go out, we're getting these seer kicks ASAP, and tanks, you're being aware of that big tank buster on the watchers. Now the other area that is problematic is the actual gauntlet itself here, and so you just want to make sure you are pulling these tainted sentries without Gill Goblin. So this guy kind of pats back and forth through the Gill Goblin pack, but also up to the front here. That's when you want to pull him. Do him solo without the Gill Goblins. You can maybe drag him into the Gill Goblins again when he's reduced to like 40% HP or 30% HP, just to get some more effective cleave on these guys and not bolster it too hard. Same deal with this sentry. Make sure you pull it back and kill it over here alone, and then move into the next pack of the Gill Goblins. And that's really the main thing, right? Because these Gill Goblins have so much less HP, right? Like this is like, again, like more than 3 times as much HP on the sentry than this the Gill Goblin Mage kind of thing. So make sure you are not pulling these at the same time together. But again, when this gets low, you can pull it on top of these Gill Goblins for some more effective cleave. Atal'Dazar, honestly, maybe the easiest bolstering dungeon. There's not really much that has changed. The biggest thing maybe is Juggernauts down in the living area, right? These 2 guys over here. Because their charge can be quite dangerous. So just focus on these mobs in these pulls so you don't juice them up with bolstering. But otherwise, a lot of the mobs in the area, even these empowered honor guards, right, they're pretty similar HP wise to a lot of these other mobs in here. So at worst, you kill the Witch Doctor early and you get 1 stack of bolster on these packs, but it's not really a huge deal. So this is probably a prime dungeon or a fortified bolstering week, because you get to skip Tyrannical Yasma, and there's not really a ton of bad bolstering pulls in here. Of course, Toxic Swords do not bolster, thank God. But otherwise, yeah, this dungeon, not too much to talk about, but, you know, let me know if you guys have any issues with this one. Black or Cold, somewhat similar as well. There's a couple spots to be aware of. To start off, it's these retainer mobs. They have a little bit more health than the counselors, but not too much. So just, again, even cleave, but focusing on getting these retainers down. And that's because their magic dot that they throw out on random targets. Dots do actually update if a mob gets bolstered while the dot is already out. So if someone gets a dot near the end of a pull, and then the retainers start getting bolstered from all the counselors dying here, right? That's going to instantly update the dot damage to the bolstered damage, and that's very scary, right? So just be aware of these guys at the end of pulls, right? Save magic dispels maybe for that area, who knows, personals, that kind of thing. But that's really the dangerous part at the beginning. And then the other thing to keep in mind is the worm tongue guys after the second boss over here. You're probably going to need to split this pull up into like 2 or 3 if you were doing them in 1 or 2 pulls. Just make it 1 extra pull basically, because these guys, again, it's hard to kind of cleave them totally evenly. And you have these tricksters, which have significantly less HP, as you see in the corner, than the actual scavengers here, and that can be quite scary. If you bolster up these scavengers, maybe miss a stop and they start spinning everywhere and killing all your DPS, so not ideal there. So separate these pools a little bit more, and other than that, you should be mostly fine. I think Darkheart Thicket is another kind of like Black Rook, where there's a couple problem areas. The first is the very first pull, because you have a bunch of lower health mobs with a bear, which again has over double the health of all the other mobs in the pull. So big damage focus on this bear. And again, this is the most dangerous pull in the dungeon. Lust it, pop your CDs, pop your pots, or whatever you need to do to kill this. Maybe don't pop your pots if you're going to invis later. And kill this grizzly. Focus this grizzly hard. Use defensives if this stuff starts dying and this guy gets bolstered on his roar. That is, again, the best spot to defensive. If this guy gets like, what, 4 bolster stacks or whatever, and he's about to roar, like your second roar, so you already also have a damage amp, pop a defensive and hope. But your goal here is going to be to nuke this guy down probably before he does like a third roar, just with Bloodlust and all cooldowns and stuff. So that's the big thing. Focus this guy. The secondary thing is going to be after the first boss with these blossoms, right? There's going to be usually a lot of chain pulling with these blossoms. You just kind of pull them around and you don't really care about them too much. But if you pull like all 6 of these blossoms, for example, into this pull with a double keeper, which already also has 2 blossoms, you're going to have a tough time as a tank player here, because 2 bolsterings on 8 of these mobs is rough, right? Or maybe even a third if you're killing a dryad, that kind of thing. So make sure you are just aware of the damage intake of having these blossoms around with bolstering and potentially killing them off before you actually chain pull into another keeper pull, that kind of thing. But really, that's just tank damage. So if your tank is fine with it, then it's not a huge deal. Finally, we've got the Dawn of the Infinite Dungeons. Galakrond's Fall is similar to Atal'Dazar. I think there's only one thing to be aware of, and that is these Epoch Rippers here. They have so much more HP again than all the other mobs in this area. It's not a ton, and like we saw in some of the previous dungeons, it's not even double some of these guys. It's just like 1.5 times. So they're going to have some health by the end of the pull, and you just want to be aware of their time rip jump away when they are bolstered. Make sure you are kind of loosely spread, so when they do teleport out and potentially instantly kill someone, it only killed 1 person instead of like 2 to 3, right? So just watch these guys. And hope it doesn't target you, maybe. That's a good one. But luckily, the run back is pretty close here, and you don't pull too many of these guys in the dungeon. Obviously, don't do this pull maybe on bolstering week, but you know what I mean. Epoch Rippers are really the only problem point. Later on, it's not too big a deal, right? You can control how many dragons you have. You're pulling relatively small in this area, so pretty fine to deal with outside of this initial pull before the first boss. Similar to Murozond's Rise, actually. Most of this dungeon is perfectly fine with bolstering. It's just the first boss area with all these smaller mobs plus mini bosses. I think in particular the Maiden here, she has that Ancient Radiance AoE damage, which is quite scary. And then of course Spurlock has the Sandstorm damage on a player potentially there. So you want to be careful bolstering her up too much. Something you can use as like a little tip is you can use Valo's Titanic Bulwark, and you can stand in that if you ever accidentally bolster up the Maiden too much and you pull them both at the same time. But my recommendation is probably just to not pull too much onto the Maiden in general. A few stacks is not too big a deal. You probably only have 1 Radiance, which you can defensive. If you get like a 3 stack onto the Maiden, and then you should be fine. Or again, use Valo's kind of barrier as well. But in general, you're just going to want to go a little bit slower in this area, particularly when you have the Maiden with you, just because again, that unavoidable AoE damage going out on the party. You do not want to bolster that up too high, especially when you don't have defensive coverage. But the rest of the dungeon, again, pretty small pull count. Luckily, this stuff here doesn't bolster or on death at all outside of the big guys, so it's not too big a deal in there, and it's all small pull count for the rest of this dungeon. But there we have it, guys, some bolstering tips for Season 3 of Dragonflight. Hopefully this helps you out, and if it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. If you have any questions, please drop those down in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer. Plus, make sure you do come stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and say hi. As always, I need to thank my amazing Patreon supporters. Your help really does mean a lot to me. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.